Whatever hopes and dreams that Penn State had of a March Madness run, Ohio State absolutely crushed them.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And of course, as always, thank you so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. My name is Zach Seyko, and I'm your host of the show, this live show to talk about Penn State men's basketball. They lose to Ohio State 83-64. And for any chance that it's just a telling sign. Now, Penn State men's basketball could try to go on a run here. They certainly do have a favorable schedule, but the games that are winnable, where they should be favored, they should come out on top, and they lose by 17. This was the return to Rec Hall game. This one was supposed to be a big deal for Penn State, and they get absolutely embarrassed. Since this is a live show, of course, let me know your thoughts down in the comments section. Be a part of the conversation here. But Penn State, even if they do try to go on a run, it's just telling that they're not going to be able to compete with the best of the best teams. They're better than Minnesota upcoming. I don't know about UCLA, but USC, Washington, Nebraska, and then Minnesota again. Those are all winnable games, but it's the games against Ohio State that really don't give you a lot of confidence there. A game that they should have won, big spectacle with the return to Rec Hall game. You're favored. The odds makers say that, hey, you're a multiple possession favorite in this game. And it looks like Penn State just doesn't have it this season. And that's disappointing because I really did believe that this was a March Madness team based on what they were able to do through the transfer portal. They were able to get complementary players. They were able to make upgrades, not only to the starting lineup, but to the bench rotation as well. And it still wasn't enough. I'm not sure if Ace Baldwin is still dealing with his multitude of issues that Mike Rhodes alluded to, a back injury and then some other problems, because he certainly does not look like the same Ace Baldwin. But it also has to do with chemistry. The chemistry is just not there for this team. And I think that's the biggest component of it, which is so surprising because Mike Rhodes and Ace Baldwin have worked together now for a long time. Same with Nick Kern Jr. when they were back at VCU. Then they come over to Happy Valley, so you have the foundation. And then you add Zach Hicks, you add DeMarco Dunn, Puff Johnson, not in the lineup because he's a little banged up here, but the team had its nucleus back. It's not like this is a completely brand new constructed team, but you wouldn't know that based on the way that they play basketball this year. I didn't realize that Puff Johnson was the glue that was holding this entire team together for being a legitimate team. They crushed Purdue. I don't think it's now a mirage, but I don't think at the time that it was. I think Puff Johnson is a lot more valuable than people are giving him credit for. Penn State they're just not as deep of a team as they were maybe originally projected to, because now Puff Johnson's not available off of the bench and Penn State has no answer. They have DeMarco Dunn, who gave you quite a bit in the previous game, but nothing after that. And against Michigan, DeMarco Dunn kept Penn State in that game off of the bench. That was a game that they should have won. It's the games that they can't close out because great teams will close those games out. Illinois, fine. Ace Baldwin got injured there. Puff Johnson wasn't available, but there's no excuse against an Oregon. No excuse in the Palestra game against Indiana. Michigan State's a better team, but that was, right, a couple scores and you win that game. You were there. You were right there. Then they battle back against Rutgers and they lose by 1 point to Iowa. They lead against Michigan and blow that lead in the final seconds of the game, and no chance against Ohio State. So they're just absolutely reeling. I think this team has, unfortunately, some identity issues. This is a team that is not a shooting team, but they tried to be a shooting team. I mean, Ace Baldwin is better going to the cup. Same thing with Nick Kern Jr. Freddie DeLeon isn't really trusted that much in these types of games, or he has been trusted more so. Obviously didn't score any points in this game against Ohio State, but it's telling that this group's just not built for March Madness, whether it's bad luck. I think there is coaching, because a team that was built with the same core from a season ago, there really aren't a lot of excuses at this point. Expectations were high. Mike Rhodes said it in his introductory press conferences that this is a team we expect to win now. The buy-in, and then the statement was made against a Purdue team that is still ranked, a Purdue team that is still highly respectable and should honestly make a Sweet 16. Go back to that original podcast. It is a freezing cold take saying that Penn State could make the round of 32. The Sweet 16 is where the ceiling is. I think Elite 8 was maybe some really overambitious dreams, but they had the look and feel of a tournament team, and now they're not. So they got to go on an incredible run if they want to have any hopes. Getting Puff Johnson back, we don't know the extent, the severity of his injury, but I'm kind of sold out on this team at this point. They will win some games down the stretch here because they are playing some weaker competition, but don't let that get your hopes up. They would have to do the unthinkable, win the Big Ten tournament, because you asked Ace Baldwin, you asked Nick Kern Jr., you asked Zach Hicks. I asked them, how do you view this team? We think we can win a Big Ten championship. Okay, whether that was the conference title or the actual tournament itself, you got to be able to get into the tournament, man. This team might, who knows if they even make the tournament, because they're not taking all of the teams. They're not taking all 18 for the Big Ten tournament. It's crazy to think, right? 18 teams in the Big Ten conference, right? I know conference realignment. I know that exists, but you're not getting, they don't trust the freshman players. Miles Goodman is not available, is just not relied on for them. Dominic Stewart, Javin Carter. So Puff Johnson goes down and it's just DeMarco Dunn off the bench. They don't really have any answers after that. So I'm out on this Penn State men's basketball team. It's a shame because this was the group to do it, but they're not doing it. And they're going to lose everybody after the season. No Ace Baldwin, no Puff Johnson, no Nick Kern Jr. You have Freddie Dilion. You have Yannick Conan-Niederhauser to build around, and then hopefully this freshman class, which is one of the best, and if I'm not mistaken, is the best recruiting class in Penn State basketball history. That group needs to take a massive step forward going into next season, or else they're going to be the bottom feeders of the Big Ten Conference. I see we got some comments in the live chat, so we'll talk about this one more in depth as Penn State loses 83-64. Didn't help themselves out at the charity stripe either. They missed out on plenty of free throws, but we'll get your thoughts and finish recapping this one on a live edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. And today's show is brought to you by Gametime. Attending playoff games is an experience like no other. The energy, the excitement, the connection with other fans, it's all unmatched. The thrill of seeing your favorite team win a playoff game live is a memory that you'll never forget. And that not only includes the playoff games in general, but the big game itself. That's right. You can get tickets for the big game on Gametime. And this season, Gametime is making it easier than ever to create those unforgettable moments with their new feature called Gametime Picks. It filters out all the fluff to show you only the best deals on great seats so you can focus on what actually matters, being there. You can use the Gametime Picks feature to get tickets for any upcoming game, not just the big game, but any sport, any game you think of it, tickets are available there. And it's never been easier. You'll have the super deals that give you incredible value on amazing seats. You can preview your point of view from that spot that you're thinking about before buying, and then all in pricing. That's a game changer. No surprise fees at checkout. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account. Redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Appreciate all of you hanging out here on the live show to recap Penn State men's basketball against Ohio State. This team looks absolutely like a team that is in disarray, played like a team that had no energy, no heart, and no sense of pride nor urgency. That's kind of why I dubbed the thumbnail that you could click on for the YouTube live here. It's a downward spiral. And that's on coaching. This is a veteran team. Ace Baldwin, Nick Kern, Zach Hicks. It's not like they're, missing Puff Johnson is one thing. He gives you defensive tenacity, grit, and clearly some element of leadership, because we were informed that this team had it, that this was the best. You were going to get the best version of Ace Baldwin. And that's not true. I don't think he's 100%. I think he's playing through whatever, and there's no excuses in any sport, but I don't understand how Ace Baldwin took a step backwards when he was able to take over games at time. It's really, last year's team feels like they were better than this year's team. And that's really saying something. So this group should have taken a step forward, but biggest thing is no chemistry. And I guess Puff Johnson missing is a big part of that. Whatever happened to the style of offense that Mike Rhodes was utilizing earlier in the season? They played fast pace, up-tempo style of play. Now the style of play has changed a lot. I think part of that has to do with the fact that Puff Johnson's not available. And I'm not just trying to put this all on the absence of Puff Johnson, but Yannick Konen-Niederhauser is a 7-foot center. He can't go a full game. He's playing 33 minutes. They based their offense around Konen-Niederhauser tonight against Ohio State, and he gave you 21 points. I mean, he was efficient. He was good, but part of the reason, so you mentioned, I'm not saying that it's, they can't run the fast-paced style without, if they were able to cycle Niederhauser in on and off the bench. They can't do that anymore. So they are going more of a traditional offense in it, and it's just not working. Everything that they game planned for, everything that they built for, they're not able to do it. And that's why they're going away from that fast-paced system. I mean, Joe Christman has a good amount of influence on this team, at least from the offensive side of it. I'm not trying to point the finger at him, but that's where that fast pace comes from. I mean, Penn State, I think, is going away from its blueprint almost because they have to. Ace's ball security is a problem. He's had 3+ turnovers in every game in January, and the turnovers give up 8 to 12 points a game. Need our best player to clean that up in order to compete with teams that are better. Very well said. Very well said. And I see you added one here. Not saying Ace is the reason we're losing. He needs to be better. I think coaching, because it's not like Penn State is in these games. I'm going to first chalk it up to Mike Rhodes and company. They are getting outcoached in the final minutes. And this is a team that we've used words lost, disarray, no sense of urgency. Now we're saying no confidence. These are 4th, 5th year players. There is no excuse. And they don't look like it. They look like a team that's never played basketball together, that they put together they met at your local YMCA, and they put a pickup roster together. And that's how they're playing basketball at times, especially when it comes down to crunch time. But now that's the spiraling part. So you can't let one loss turn into 2 or 3 or 4. And that's what happened here, because Penn State is comparable to Ohio State. I would argue that they are the better team, but when you lose games the way that you do, when you should win against Michigan, when you should win against Iowa, when you should win against Oregon, those start to add up. And I think even the most veteran savvy players, eventually that is going to kind of break your confidence at some point in time. And that's why we saw it the way that we did. Ohio State smelled blood in the water, and Penn State really didn't offer any resistance. This was the return to rec game. This was supposed to be a big deal, but coming off back-to-back losses the way they did, this really should have been the turning point of a win streak. This should have been a 4-game winning streak. They beat Rutgers. They should have beaten Iowa. They should have beaten Michigan. Shoulda, coulda, woulda. It doesn't matter. They're almost last in the Big Ten. And I did not think that Penn State, I thought Penn State would finish 500 or better in the Big Ten, and that's enough to get you in the tournament. That's not going to be the case. Now they could, I want to be the hopeful optimist here, right? I don't want to just sell out on this team, but you would have to go on an unprecedented run here. And it's not that they can't, it's just going to be difficult to do because of the road travel that you have in between. You should be able to beat Minnesota. I would like to think so, but my confidence dwindles because you're no better than this Golden Gophers team at this point in time. You're on the same playing level. I don't see, I would like to say confidently that Penn State is much better than this Golden Gophers team, but not based on the record. They're not that much better than them. And overall, but conference record, they're behind Minnesota right now at the moment. If Puff Johnson comes back, I guess I'll change my tune a little bit because they'll have the roster that they need. I mean, that's the best version of their team is Puff Johnson in the lineup. But it's not looking good for this Penn State men's basketball team. They have one final opportunity. If they can figure it out, if they can get it together, Minnesota, UCLA, even though it's at UCLA, at USC, these aren't insurmountable games. My confidence, my expectations for them have changed. I expect them to beat a Minnesota team, but I don't know anymore. I don't have that kind of confidence. Nebraska, Minnesota again, at Indiana, Maryland, they certainly don't have a gauntlet. So never say never, right? I gave that optimism last time around that, hey, they can do this, but it starts with Ohio State. It's the same thing again. Hey, they can do this. It starts with Minnesota, but it doesn't get any easier. They can finish 500 in conference, but they have to win out. And is that going to be good enough for the committee? Perhaps. The only quality win that I see, and that's why even if they do go on that run, even though if they prove me wrong, prove a lot of other Penn State fans wrong, and they do go on a stretch where they win 5 in a row, and it's not against the greatest competition in the Big Ten. You lost the games that you were there outside of Purdue. You lost to Rutgers already. You have Clemson earlier in the season that that was another team that they should have beaten. And that was a sign of things to come. They got one against Northwestern, but those games against Iowa, Michigan, and Ohio State, those don't look good. You get blown out by Illinois. So we'll see. I mean, destiny's in their hands. They still control their own fate to an extent, but it just gets more difficult. You have to rattle off a 5-game win streak. That's really the only thing that can redeem Penn State at this point. I really don't see anything else, but these teams aren't significantly better than them. They should be able to beat these other teams. But I do think it is Ace Baldwin not living up to the expectations, Puff Johnson injury, DeLeon and Yannick Konen-Niederhauser maybe not offering as much chemistry as we initially would have thought of. I see a chemistry issue. I see players that played basketball together that don't know how to play basketball together when they get into the final 4 minutes. When they get to the final 4, and I don't mean the final 4 of the tournament, the final 4 minutes of a basketball game, Ace Baldwin, Nick Kern Jr., Zach Hicks, why are they struggling? And it's, I don't know if it's DeLeon and Konen-Niederhauser or if it's Ace Baldwin, Kern, and Hicks. They don't have an answer in the final 4 minutes. That's why I put it on coaching, because it should not be this abysmal. Most of this group has played basketball with each other. DeMarco Dunn was part of this equation too, and we've rarely seen him until now, where it's almost out of necessity. I thought DeMarco Dunn was better at basketball than that, but he's not in the rotation consistently. Is he dealing with something that I don't know about? Not having Puff Johnson in the lineup is a big loss. Ace has clearly been off and not himself since his back injury. And I'd even add more to that. I think he's dealing with things we don't even know about. Rhodes needs to seriously get it together and shake things up with his team. And I don't know what you do. I don't know what you do. You can brag all you want. OH. I know how it goes. Penn State football has your defensive coordinator. That's my response there. I guess you have the national title, so maybe I shouldn't talk too much here. But Penn State has Jim Knowles. That's the thing I'll say about this basketball game. Is this game doesn't matter. Penn State has Jim Knowles, right? But if for Penn State men's basketball, yeah, let's keep the conversation there and not turn this into football, even though it'd be nice. Never say never. It just gets a lot more difficult. It's no different than the last time I recapped one of these games. So 83-64, just to kind of go through some stats. Yannick Konen-Niederhauser, great game, was efficient, 8 of 14 from the field, 21 points overall. Zach Hicks gave you 50% from 3-point range, 13 points. Kern, Baldwin gave you 10 apiece, and DeMarco Dunn gave you 8 points off the bench. Like I said, unless one of the freshmen, like a Miles Goodman, steps up because he was your best prospect in this recruiting class, I don't know what they can expect differently other than Puff Johnson to magically get healthier and get on a better timeline to return. He is the answer to giving them somewhat of a semblance of a chance back, because this can't continue. If you are going to be absolutely demoralized after a couple of bad losses that you can't even get up for the return to rec hall game against an Ohio State team that you should beat, then that falls on coaching. That falls on coaching. So the way Penn State is in the Big Ten right now, I want to make sure I get this right, in the Big Ten standings. They are third from last as it presently stands. Again, records could change based on who's playing, right? Illinois is playing at the present right now, but they're way at the top. But They are 3-8 in conference. Nebraska and Washington are the only two teams below them. Minnesota is a half game ahead at 3-7. They're 13-9 overall, and they're now on a 3-game losing streak. So we'll see how men's basketball can turn it around. That's going to do it for this live edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. Thank you so much for hanging out here on the show and bringing your thoughts and contributing to the conversation as well. We do this. We recap these games live each and every time, so be on the lookout for more content and more coverage around Penn State men's basketball. But thank you for choosing Locked On Nittany Lions as your go-to podcast for not only Penn State basketball, Penn State football, Penn State wrestling. If you're new to the show, subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts. This is the Locked On Podcast Network, Locked On Nittany Lions, where it is your team every day. So for more conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams, keep it right here on Locked On Nittany Lions.